Welcome back to Grassroots Media. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Billy Kaylor Show, where we cover everything on the black coal with the Chuckey-Doak Black Knights football team. As always, I'm joined here with head coach Billy Kaylor. Coach, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing all right, man.
A little warm outside.
Yeah, a little toasty.
I thought it'd cool off a little bit. I was hoping it would. It seemed like we got down to the 80s a little bit, but for some reason, you look at the weather this week, every day it's supposed to be 90 plus.
Next week's supposed to be 80, highs in the low 80s, so go figure.
Thing
That's
is,
south for you.
Yep. With Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, any place like that, you really don't get into the cooler months of football season until you get around playoff time.
Shoot, man, it's cooler here than most places I've lived. And
that's true.
These old boys up here, these kids complain about it being 90. We kicked off a game in October one year, and the temperature at kickoff, 7:30 on a Friday night in October, was 92.
Was it Georgia or South Carolina?
South Carolina.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was either of those states. But South Carolina, I can believe that for sure.
Yeah, I've had many seasons run mid-90s all the way into October, so you know it is what it is. They don't know that life, so they're burning up a little bit today.
Once it breaks 90 in a few weeks, you'll be feeling good.
Oh man, I've been feeling good all summer. I thought it was a pretty mild summer. It only had
five or six.
Yeah, only 5 or 6 days above 95. That's pretty good.
Wow, for us, including myself, I thought it was one of the hottest I've ever experienced.
It's pretty comfortable for this old boy, I tell you.
It was a little hot Friday night too. One thing that was hot also was your offense
we were running
and Hayden Roper on his feet. That's one thing that, of course, we have to talk about that we mentioned first. Usually, I jump right into the interview. The first question I ask is about the game itself, but when you have a performance like Hayden Roper had, you can't ignore that, and you have to go straight into it. 366 yards, a new single-game record for rushing yards at Chuckey-Doak High School. He also had 6 rushing touchdowns, which also ties the single-game record for touchdowns at Chuckey-Doak. Yep. Talk about just the fantastic game that he had. I talked to him after the game, and he said it felt like he could do whatever he wanted, and I told him, well, it looked like you could do whatever you wanted because as soon as he touched the ball, it seemed like he was scoring, or he was a threat to score every single time.
Yeah, man. I mean, he did a great job for us. Had 15 tackles as a linebacker too.
Wow.
Played almost every snap of the ball game. I mean, you know, he did a great job. He did a good job up front, obviously, for him to break to the second level. And then once he got there, he did what he wanted. I mean, you know, Hayden's a really talented back, as we were kind of talking before the interview, and has been overshadowed by Brayson, who's a phenomenal back as well. But Hayden does a really good job and does it the right way, man. He runs hard. He told me the other day, he said, I wasn't even paying attention to the records. He said, I was just having fun running the ball. And that's what he does. You know, I think you'd have to pull him off the field if he was hurt. He just wants to play football and does a good job of it.
And that's the type of player you want to have too.
Oh, no question. And tough, man. I was telling you before, last year, he ran it against Unaka in the first quarter last year, and had a fairly serious leg injury. Played the rest of the game because
that's the first quarter, the first game of the season too.
Played the rest of the game because he didn't want to be hurt, and he was back 4 weeks later after a pretty serious injury and ready to roll. And you know, he's a tough kid.
117 combined points too. Is that the most combined points that you've been a part of in a high school football game? If
it's not, it's pretty daggone close.
71 to 46 final, 117 combined points. For me, it was you all made me work the hardest I might have ever worked for a football game because it seemed like as soon as Unaka would score, and I'm tallying down what happened, I'm sending a tweet out. If there's a video, I'm editing it and sending it out. And I turn around and I apologize to some of the players because some of your players didn't get a highlight clip shown because I didn't have time because as soon as you got the ball back, you were scoring.
Yeah, we had some missteps on defense, some stuff that's really very, very fixable. But we got you got a lot of young kids and got a bunch of guys playing new positions. You have some issues sometimes, and credit Unaka, they're a good football team. They're very explosive offensively. They do a really good job over there with some of their down the field stuff and their screen game, and they made it interesting. It's kind of a perfect storm for a kid like Roper. They kept scoring, so
they gave him the opportunity.
Kept it about a 2-score game, and you don't really feel good about pulling out a lot of ones in a 2-score game, and because high school football is you're 2 plays away from him being in the mix right there.
That's one thing that we will mention here in a minute too.
So it's a perfect storm for him to keep getting carries in a game where you score 70 points. You feel like maybe your one running back shouldn't get that many carries, but it's a perfect storm for it to happen, and we did a good job up front with it too.
I'm impressed he had 15 tackles on defense, too. I didn't know about that going into it.
Oh, and I think he threw up on the field about 3 times and just kept
Did
playing.
he? I didn't catch that.
Oh, yeah. I think he threw up mid-run one time, just kept playing. So, tough kid.
He loves to play the game of football.
Yep.
But as you mentioned, they kept reeling you back in, and that's what allowed Hayden to get a lot of those runs. He started out hot with that 56-yard scoring touchdown in the first quarter, about a minute and a half in. That put you up 7-0. And then one play I want to talk about also that gets overshadowed just because Hayden had such a terrific night was Dominic Hanlon's catch in the back of the end zone. Dom was kind of flushed out of the pocket, scrambled a little bit, saw him down there towards the end zone, threw it up to him, and Unaka's defender had his back turned, so he goes up, grabs it right over his head and comes down. Gets both feet in bounds, it looked like. I know in high school you just have to get one, but it looked like he had an NFL catch where he had both in bounds. And a great catch to put you up 14-0, and I guess that was kind of the highlight of the game, that kind of catch.
Yeah, I mean, he did a really good job. You know, Dom's a junior who didn't play much for us last year and has really come on and done some good things. That was a great catch right there. And, you know, Dominique had a good throw right there. He rolled out of the pocket and does some good things with his feet. So it was good to see those guys connect. You know, Ethan Heimiller took a long one, caught a little screen and took it to the house, and that was a good one too. So we did some good things in the passing game as well. It's very, you know, Dom Atchison had, I think, for 157 and 3 touchdowns, which is not a bad night by anybody's measure. It gets pretty overshadowed.
Yeah.
Gets pretty overshadowed by 366. So
that's one thing I'll jump into just because we talked about it after the game. I talked about it on Saturday morning, and we had previewed him, talking about how he was going to be a breakout athlete for you. He kind of had a breakout season last year as a sophomore, but you expect him to have more of a breakout season this year because he's moving positions. He's becoming a starting quarterback for the first time at the high school level, and in his debut in his season opener, he did a great job. He managed the game well, 3 passing touchdowns. When he was flushed out of the pocket, you even said it yourself, he turned nothing into something. Had a 31-yard run, and on the very next play, Hayden takes it into the end zone from 38 out. So it was plays like that that helped your offense a lot. You said that he's going to be a weapon for you all year, and he was certainly a weapon in his debut at quarterback.
Certainly was. You know, like anybody else who's in a new position, particularly one like quarterback, there's some things we can certainly improve on. And we got some things to improve on outside as well. We had several drops and where he put the ball where it's supposed to be and we just didn't come up with the catch, or, you know, things that timing that takes just repetitions. You know, you can't coach repetitions, and the more of those we get, the better we'll get. But I thought I was really proud of how he played.
Throughout the game, too, you went up 14-0, and then they started reeling you back into 14-8. You got up 21-8 with that 48-yard touchdown from Ethan Heimiller, and then they scored again to bring it within 5. I think 5 was the closest they got within. You scored again, they scored again. It seemed like you were going back and forth until you had 2 scores and a field goal to go into halftime up 23. And then coming out of halftime, like you mentioned, in high school football, you're 2 big plays away from that immediately changing. And that's what happened with a safety, and then they had a touchdown and a 2-point conversion right after that, and they scored 10 points within a small amount of time to bring it within a 23-point game all the way back down to 13 and 2 possessions. So in that moment right there, what were you kind of saying to your guys on the sideline?
We just got to keep playing. You know, we got to keep playing. I told them before the game, you know, it's the first game of the year with a bunch of new guys, and good things are going to happen, bad things are going to happen. Control what you can control. The next play is the most important thing we got to do, and control that next thing, and I think they did a pretty good job of that.
And I think the fourth quarter was my favorite quarter, too, because they got within 13 again, as we mentioned right there. But from there on out, you kept scoring, it seemed, almost every time you got the ball and kind of shut the door on them, too. They got close again at the end. I think they got within 14 at 52-38. Hayden had one more touchdown to put you up by 21. And then Micah Gray from them actually brought it back down to 13. Then you had Skylar Davis and Marcus Brick getting in the end zone. Those were 2 names we talked about at the beginning of the year. 2 names that got into the end zone, too, to ice it for you. Skylar getting in from 29 out, and then Marcus getting in from 6 out to ice it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they did 2 freshmen right there getting Skylar played a lot of football Friday night, both at receiver and corner, and did a really good job adjusting his corner route there to the safety, and, you know, kind of we're throwing one there just to get a first down and keep the chains moving, and safety jumps underneath him. He keeps it tall and catches it and is able to take it to the house. So you're excited to see a kid get his first high school touchdown, you know. And then Marcus, we ran inside zone right there, and he saw a little bit of green grass out there and stuck his foot in the ground and bounced it and added his on there. So, you know, a lot of kids, a lot of young kids played a lot of good football Friday for us.
And then the last question I have going into the end of the recap from week 1 is, what's some of the rust that you want to shake off from week 1? Because that's one thing I mentioned on Saturday morning. A lot of the county, I think every county team had some rust, and that's usually evident in week 1. because you don't get a lot of time to shake that off. You go from dead week straight into just scrimmages and 7-on-7s, and then you have the jamboree, which is kind of just a glorified dress out, and then you go right into week 1 of action. And I think mostly every team, you'd say about 75-80% is going to have some rust. So what's some of the rust that you want to shake off going into week 2 against Grainger?
Oh, just some of our operational stuff. You know, we got a lot of kids playing new positions and guys that were on special teams this year that weren't last year and things like that. So making sure we're paying attention on who's on and off the field. When we're changing personnel, that kind of stuff. And then a lot of unforced errors. You know, we had some snap issues, which with the freshman center you're going to have sometimes. And so cleaning up our snap issues and then some of the post-snap penalties. We had a couple of dead ball fouls and stuff like that just, you know, they're drive killers, things you can't have. They hurt us. So I'd like to clean that up and just play a little repetitive, but play a little cleaner football and be a little more dialed in. But overall, I didn't think it was bad.
One thing I had in my notes that I wanted to mention too before we go into break, one player that you were proud of after the game that you mentioned that I wanted to speak about was Billy Hanlon. Yeah. Great job kicking field goals or extra points. Had a field goal going into halftime too. He did terrific. I think he only missed one extra point all night. Yeah, well, I had one that was missed. That was not a great snap. Holder kind of couldn't decide whether to pick it up, put it down late, and pushed one there. But and then had another bad snap. But he did a really good job. It's the first time kicking in a varsity football game, and had some really good kickoffs for us. And you know, made 9 extra points in a field goal or 8 extra points in a field goal, something like that. So that's a pretty good night for him. That's a terrific night for him being his first night. You had a lot of those against Unaka. You had a lot of firsts. First night for Don Matchison at quarterback. First night as a starter at running back for Hayden Roper.
First night as a starter for most of those kids.
Most of those guys, yes. Yeah. And it was a terrific win, 71-46. Going to week 2 now, you've got Grainger coming up. Yeah. Very tough opponent. We'll go ahead and talk about them in just a minute. But before we do, as always, we need to take a break in between the recap and the preview. So we'll be right back after these messages and a quick break here on Grassroots Media.
Pizza Inn's new Right Way Buffet is open and ready for you and your family. Now with new garlic buttery crust and stuffed crust pizza, along with salads and desserts. It's the best part of your day. The all-day, everyday buffet. Only at Pizza Inn Greenville.
Welcome back to Grassroots Media. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Billy Kaylor Show, where we cover everything at Chuckey-Doak High School with the Chuckey-Doak Black Knights football team. As always, I'm here with Black Knights head coach Billy Kaylor. So you've got Grainger this week. A little bit of an adjustment going from week 1 with a 1A opponent, and now you go into week 2 with a higher classified opponent in Grainger. So talk to me about what you expect going into the Grainger game. I know you travel on the road, you go to Rutledge to play them. So what are you expecting when you kick off on Friday night?
Well, I mean, they're a good football team. We snuck them down here last year. They were very, very physical. From film, we expect the same thing. They're big, they're physical. They play downhill, kind of smash mouth style of football. They're well coached on both sides of the football, and like I said, extremely physical. So it'll be a challenge for us for sure.
And I know they've got the same coaching staff. They've got a lot of the same players coming back too. We previewed them last year with their offense and defense. Are you kind of expecting to see the same formations and the same stuff on offense and defense?
They're a little bit different offensively this year. Okay. A lot of similar schemes, but their formation-wise are a little bit different. Kind of a double wing look, a little bit less overload. But they showed us a lot of overload last year, but man, they run the ball really well. Got some big backs, kids that run it hard, and got some athletes outside. Defensively, they do a good job stopping the run. They're big across the front and tackle well. So it's going to be a challenge, no doubt.
On defense too, what do you expect them to come out of on the defensive line?
I think they're going to give us an even front, bring a little bit of pressure, inside pressure, but. They've shown a little bit of odd front too, so we kind of got to be ready for that just in case they throw it at us. But we'll adjust on the fly if necessary, but I think we'll get even front.
The Grainger game to me is always kind of the measuring stick for Chuckey-Doak in my mind. I might be the only person that feels that way, but for me, 2 years ago, that was the game that I think really proved to everybody that, hey, Chuckey-Doak's for real, because they went on the road to Rutledge, beat Grainger by a pretty wide margin, and that showed everybody they were for real. Last year, you took on Grainger. It was kind of the same thing. You got a win over Grainger last year, and it showed, okay, this Chuckey-Doak team's back. They're the same caliber as they were the year before. This year, do you kind of feel like it's the measuring stick for you this year, or is it one of those where you're just going to kind of go into kickoff and see with such a new team with a lot of new faces?
I mean, I don't know if it's a measuring stick it's not a measuring stick for our season. You know, anytime you put that on a game, you know, and then you, God forbid, you lose that game, then all of a sudden, what's the rest of it for, you know? So it's not a measuring stick for our season. It would certainly be mean a lot to our kids and say a lot to us as a staff if we can play well and beat a really physical, good football team.
That's one thing you mentioned against Unaka. It's a big confidence boost winning in week 1, and that's what a lot of those kids needed. It'd be an even bigger one if you go in and beat a 4A opponent in week 2.
Yeah, it's certainly something to measure against because, like I said, it's a 4A team. They're big. They're older than they've got a lot of guys back, a lot of good football players back. So it's certainly something to measure against. Is it the measuring stick for our season? No, I don't think so. But is it certainly a good litmus test for us to see where we're at as we move forward into region play and stuff that's going to determine November? Absolutely.
I guess the litmus test was more of what I should have said instead of a measuring stick.
That's a good science reference.
Yeah,
right?
That'll kind of be one of the welcome to high school football games for a lot of those freshmen, a lot of those young kids too, because you play a team like Unaka, and credit to Unaka, like we mentioned, a lot of great skill players out there on the outside and between the trenches whenever they were running the ball. But when you go from a 1A opponent to a 4A opponent, that's a big adjustment. 1A was kind of
a lot deeper.
1A was kind of their warm-up to high school football. When they play 4A with a more physical and a much bigger team in Grainger, that'll be a welcome to high school football moment for a few.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. And, you know, we talked about it earlier in the year. It's going to be a baptism by fire at times. That's okay. Mm-hmm. You know, it gives you a measure of a man's taking in times to struggle and strife. You know, gives you kind of a measure of what they're going to do when everything's not easy. And there's going to be a lot of times this year where it's not. And there was times Friday night where it wasn't, and I thought we got the response we wanted. It'll be a little bit more physical, a little bit more smash mouth this week. So how do we respond to that will be a good picture for us.
Going into the Grainger game, too, you've got 3 keys to the game that you need to carry out in order to get a win. What are they on Friday night?
We got to control line of scrimmage. If we can play with them up front physically, which we can, but if we do, then we'll have a pretty good chance. You know, we got to eliminate the big play on defense. That is what hurt us last week, no question. So if we can eliminate the big play on defense, control the line of scrimmage, and then be sound up front offensively, to say that I think 366 is something I've only seen one time. You know, I was told somebody else today. You know, I've had a bunch of guys go for close to 3. We had Brayson go for 341 last year. Had a bunch of teams go for 4 as a team rushing. To have one kid go for 366, I ain't never seen that. So we can't expect that. So we got to have some guys step up and make some plays in other positions. But so if we can expand our impact offensively, control the line of scrimmage, and limit the big play on defense, I think we'll be in okay shape.
One more thing to add, and I promise Hayden this will be the last time we mention it too. Hayden, I think himself had more rushing yards than a few teams in the county and the city had total last week offensively. So just a terrific night by him.
Man, I mean, it's special. You know, it's something.
And I love talking about it as much as I can too, because rarely ever do you see single game records broken with such a high amount of yards like that. If they're lower, like 266, then that might be breakable. But when you had Brazen's record last year, that was over 300, and then you have Hayden break it with 366. Last year when he set that at Unicoi, to be honest, I didn't know if it would ever get broken in my time working in Greene County sports, and then here Hayden comes a few games later.
As a coach, it's hard. You know, you get opportunities like that. You play some games where, you can keep a guy in and run it and pad his stats, but at the same time, you're doing the wrong thing if you run it up on somebody. So, you get a number like 341, and Unicoi last year was a very similar situation. That was a tight ball game. Brayson kept getting the rock because it was a tight football game, and he needed to keep running it, and he did. And it was a similar situation Friday night, and they're few and far between. And when they come, and you have a kid who can make that much magic happen, it's just pretty cool thing to watch.
Incredible game, Hayden. That's the last time we'll talk about it, I promise. But That's all I've got for you this week, unless there's anything else you'd like to add. But best of luck on Friday night. It's a weird week with it being Labor Day weekend and some games being on Thursday and Friday. But luckily for all Chuckey-Doak fans, everything's normal. You're on Friday night.
That's right.
You'll just be on the road before you get back to home soon. But, Coach, that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you once again. Always a pleasure sitting down and talking to you. Thank you all for watching this week's edition of the Terry's Flooring Billy Kaylor Show. Look forward to seeing you next time here on Grassroots Media.